recheck the fossil because I had to give a lecture at Cambridge University, and in 1999 it had been relabeled as 235 million years old. Now, I actually didn't realize it was 35 million years since I was at the museum. So it began to occur to me that all these millions of years are theories. They just represent the latest PhD. Now, at that point, you can turn around and ask another question. The Bible does say God made the world in 6 days. I've met many people who don't believe the Bible, but I haven't met anybody who can't tell me after they've read it that's what it says. And then you sit down and say, well, could you actually take any longer? Because what we're discovering from, trying to make life in test tubes is that the longer you try and take, the worse off your product is. You have to finish things quickly. You have to get a cell wall on the outside of a cell, or even the oxygen will kill it. So you can't actually take time. If you sort of haven't finished a human being by the coffee break, it won't work. It'll fall apart. So I no longer have any problem with the 6 days being literal days, particularly when you look at the biblical account in the Old Testament and then compare it with the Jesus in the New, who the New Testament says he is the creator. And then you say, what miracles did he do? The answer, he turned water into wine, H2O, here's C2H5OH. Where'd the carbon come from? Answer, he just made it on the spot. And if you've got enough brains and clout to make carbon on the spot, you don't need millions of years to make organic molecules.
Well, John, let me ask you, if let's just say there was this grand designer, architect, who would create a world that would require everything in it. It had to be perfectly positioned so far from the sun. There'd have to be watered. Everything would have to be there. Is it possible in that creative moment that as this creator, all-powerful being, spoke that world into existence, everything anywhere that was necessary for that to happen would line up, appear into the ball we call Earth, including the say pre-existing fossils, and a record as if there were an evolutionary tract of some sort, that it just came together at 1 second, because that's what it would have took over trillions and billions and hundreds of billions of years. Is that possible? And could that bridge a gap then a little bit, that when the word was spoken to create?
You'll find that your comment of including the fossils in there is sort of a hangover from the ancient Greeks, who regarded the fossils as tricks that the gods had played on us, because they dug up rocks, found fossil fishes in the rocks, and said, hey, fishes don't live in rocks, fishes live in the sea. This is a joke. But by the time you get to real geology, which, by the way, is a word invented by the Bishop of Durham, who was a creationist, what they're doing is they have a Christian mindset. God made the world. God doesn't lie. The rocks don't lie. If it looks like a fish, it's probably a fish. How did it get into the rocks? When God made the world, everything was good. Nothing was dead. The fossils weren't there at creation. So it shouldn't surprise us that it wasn't long before the Christians in geology began to say, these are things after Adam sinned, but after Noah's flood, when something could bury them quickly, and any catastrophe since then. So no, you wouldn't put the fossils in the world that God made. It would be an illusion and not real.
All right, we have this question here. John, this is for you. Most evolutionists claim that proof of evolution is here. They quote the fact that the human genes and chromosomes are changing with each generation. But synthetic man-made chemicals have been proven to change and affect the genes of the human being. Is it possible, if you can change them chemically, that it's happened before?
Well, to give the long answer to people, they just simply need to go to creationresearch.net and scroll down the sitemap until they find evidence brochures, and then there's some lovely printouts there on all of these questions at length. But to give you the short answer, I trained in geology. We geologists are undertakers. We dig up dead things. So I took 3 years of genetics to discover how living things worked. And yes, we can change man's genes with chemicals. But every time we do it, it does not improve us. I mean, the classic case is when we invented thalidomide and the mothers took it and the babies were born without arms and legs, and nobody said, look, we're evolving. We can degenerate people, but that's the opposite of evolution. Our chemical effects are not much use at all. there's a new art form coming along called genetic engineering, but we're discovering how clever you actually have to be to try and even repair something that's just busted, like diabetes, you know, with your pancreas. You just can't sort of throw any chemical at it. You have to play God. And if you don't get it right, time doesn't fix it. So, yes, you can interfere with man's genes. If you just do it randomly, he goes downhill. If you even want to repair him, you have to back up and say, I've got to be an intelligent designer here, and if I've got to play God, then that's how life got here in the first place.
Do you find, John, and I'm going to assume that at some point you must look at the data as some evolutionary scientists come out with regarding fruit flies. After so many generations, they're able to get a fruit fly's leg grown out of his eyeball. Is that really the best they can do? And is that proof at all that you can create or have evolutionary changes in a laboratory?
Well, as I said, I spent 3 years studying genetics at Queensland University, and you know, you end up pulling the salivary glands out of fruit flies for years just to see what's happening to their chromosomes. And you're quite right. The best we can do when we shoot them full of chemicals, when we X-ray them, when we do anything we can, after, you know, 50, 60 years of experimenting with fruit flies, we have managed to turn them into red-eyed, green-eyed, non-eyed, wingless, winged, ones with legs coming out of their heads, which is absolutely no use. I mean, fruit flies don't want to walk around standing on their heads. No help to them. So, that's the best you can do. I mean, most people don't even refer to fruit flies anymore. They're into bacteria, you know, superbugs evolving. So we can throw out the fruit fly. He's no use to evolution whatsoever. He's still a fruit fly or he's dead.
And is there any evidence a fruit fly ever became an apple tree?
No, they wouldn't even want to argue that. They'd probably want to argue that, you know, some sort of sea life, like a worm, turned into a fruit fly. Fruit flies are still here, and they're not doing very good at evolving. You can have different species of them, like in California. You can go up and down the coast, and it's very evident that in different areas you've produced different species. But, excuse me, they started as fruit flies, and they've ended as fruit flies. And speciation can occur without things actually changing their own kind. That's the clue that most people miss. And you've got to do what I did and say, well, if the biblical account of creation is true, what would the evidence be? Answer, if God created flies, they'd always turn into flies. If God created shrimps, they'd always turn into some kind of shrimp. And, you know, I've got enough fossil flies and enough fossil shrimps to tell me that that's all the evidence we've got. I've been out all day today in the heat down here in Tennessee digging up fossils, and they're easy to recognise. What's hard is learning their fancy Latin names that the evolutionists have come up with. But the fossils themselves are no help to the theory of evolution.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to get the classic question I've asked other creationists that have been on the program. And we were talking about drawings earlier, John. I have seen, I'm sure everyone has seen the classic drawing of a what must be a monkey to an ape man to a caveman to a human man. You've seen that evolutionary chart. My question is though, and I have never got an answer, so you get to field this question. What do the evolutionists say was the species before the monkey man ape creature? What was he before? If you go left on that chart, what was he?
Well, normally if you say pick up National Geographic and you look at their lovely diagrams, they have some sort of ape-like creature in Africa crawling down out of the trees about 3 million years ago, and hence they have words like Australopithecus. And then Australopithecus begins to stand upright, and eventually a human being's evolving out of Africa and heading north to America to get on the web, you know, TV shows like you're on. But normally they will just put it as a half ape, half man. In the textbooks, I love to point out to people that, look, if we're really honest, ignore all the pretty